I go to Sydney. My name is Kevin, and I'm from Bangladesh. I'm an English teacher, and I have been teaching students for many years. I love sharing my knowledge with my students, not only about the English language, but also about life, culture, and experiences. Recently, I had the chance to visit Sydney, Australia, and I stayed there for 1 whole month. It was an amazing journey that I will never forget, full of new experiences, challenges, and lessons. I'm writing this story to my students, and I hope you enjoy it. In this story, I will take you with me on my adventure. From the moment I started preparing for the trip to the day I returned, I will share everything: the food I tried, the places I visited, the people I met, and the difficulties I faced. This trip wasn't just a vacation. It was a journey of learning, growth, and self-discovery. As a teacher, I always tell my students that learning happens both in and outside the classroom. I believe that travel is one of the best ways to learn. So, in this story, I hope to teach you not just about Sydney, but about how important it is to experience new things, overcome challenges, and open your mind to different cultures. In the last chapter, there is a list of Australian shortened words and slang, along with how to use them. So stay tuned until the end of this video. Chapter 1: Preparation for the Trip. Going to Sydney was something I had dreamed about for a long time. I had heard so many great things about Australia: the beautiful beaches, the friendly people, and the unique culture. As an English teacher, I was also excited to visit a country where English is the main language. It would be a great opportunity to improve my teaching skills, but more importantly, it would be an adventure. Step 1: Research and planning. The first thing I did was research. I spent hours reading about Sydney, what to see, where to stay, and how much everything would cost. I wanted to make sure I was well prepared. I made a list of all the places I wanted to visit, like the Sydney Opera House, Bondi Beach, and the famous Harbour Bridge. I even watched videos about Australian culture and history, so I wouldn't feel too much like a stranger when I arrived. After researching, I made a detailed plan. I wrote down everything, from the clothes I needed to pack to how much money I would need each day. I also looked into the weather. Since it would be summer in Sydney when I arrived, I needed to pack light clothes for the warm days and a few jackets for the cooler evenings. Step 2: Preparing the documents. One of the most important things when planning a trip abroad is making sure all your documents are ready. I had to renew my passport first. I also applied for a tourist visa to Australia. The process wasn't difficult, but it took some time. I had to show that I had enough money for the trip and prove that I would return to Bangladesh after my visit. While waiting for my visa, I began saving up. A trip to Sydney isn't cheap, so I made sure to budget carefully. I saved money from my teaching salary and cut down on unnecessary expenses. I also looked for cheap flight options. Eventually, I found a flight that fit my budget and booked it. Step 3: Telling my students. Before I left, I told my students about my upcoming trip. They were excited for me and asked many questions about Australia. Some of them even asked me to bring back souvenirs. I promised to take lots of pictures and tell them everything about the trip when I returned. This gave me more motivation. I knew that this wasn't just a trip for me, it was something I could share with my students to help them learn. Step 4. Packing for the trip. Packing was another important step. I made a list of everything I needed: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, camera, and a few books to read on the long flight. Since I was going to stay for a month, I had to pack carefully to make sure I had enough clothes without overpacking. I also packed a few snacks from home, just in case I missed Bangladeshi food while I was there. Step 5. Excitement and nervousness. As the day of the trip got closer, I felt a mix of emotions. I was excited to finally visit Sydney, but I was also a little nervous. This would be the first time I would travel alone to a country so far away. What if I got lost? What if I didn't understand something? But then I reminded myself that this was a learning experience. Challenges were part of the journey, and I was ready to face them. Chapter 2. Interview with the Australian Embassy in Bangladesh. Before my journey to Sydney, I had to go through an important process: securing a visa. Traveling to Australia required me to obtain a tourist visa, and part of that process involved attending an interview at the Australian Embassy in Dhaka. I had never been to an embassy before, so I didn't know what to expect, but I knew this was a crucial step before I could even think about flying to Sydney. I remember the day of the interview clearly. It was early in the morning, and I had dressed in my best formal clothes. I wanted to make a good impression, and I knew that the embassy staff would be looking at everything, not just my paperwork, but also how I presented myself. As I stood in front of the mirror, I checked my appearance one last time. I felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This interview would decide if I could move forward with my trip plans. Preparing for the interview. In the weeks leading up to the interview, I had prepared carefully. I gathered all the necessary documents: my passport, bank statements, proof of employment as an English teacher, and a letter explaining my purpose for visiting Sydney. I wanted to be well prepared, so I practiced answering potential questions. I knew they would ask about why I wanted to visit Australia, how long I planned to stay, and whether I had enough money to cover my expenses during the trip. The embassy itself was located in a busy part of Dhaka. I arrived early, along with several other people who were also there for their visa appointments. We waited in a small room until it was time for our interviews. I could feel the tension in the air as everyone sat quietly, rehearsing their answers in their heads, just like I was. The interview process. When my name was called, I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked into the interview room. A friendly-looking woman greeted me. She asked me to take a seat and began by checking my documents. I could feel my heart racing, but I tried to stay calm and answer her questions confidently. "Why do you want to visit Sydney?" she asked. I explained that as an English teacher, I was interested in experiencing life in an English-speaking country. I told her how I wanted to explore the culture, meet new people, and learn more about how English is taught and used in everyday life in Australia. I also mentioned that this trip was a personal dream of mine. I had always been fascinated by Sydney's landmarks like the Opera House and Bondi Beach. The next question was about how long I intended to stay in Australia. I explained that I planned to stay for 1 month. I had already booked my flight and accommodation, and I showed her the confirmation details. I told her I had saved enough money to cover my expenses during the trip. She then asked about my employment. I proudly shared that I was an English teacher in Bangladesh and showed her my employment letter and the support from my school for this trip. I explained that I would be returning to my job after the trip and that this experience would help me become a better teacher by giving me more exposure to an English-speaking environment. The final part of the interview focused on my financial situation. I handed her my bank statements, which showed that I had saved up enough money to support myself while in Australia. She nodded as she reviewed the documents, and I felt a small sense of relief, knowing that I had prepared well for this moment. The outcome. After what felt like hours but was only a few minutes, the interviewer smiled at me and said, "Everything looks good, Kevin. We will process your visa, and you should receive it in a few days." I couldn't believe it. The hard part was over. I thanked her and walked out of the embassy with a big smile on my face. As I stepped out into the busy streets of Dhaka, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The interview had gone well, and soon I would be on my way to Sydney. All that was left now was to wait for my visa to arrive and get ready for the trip of a lifetime. Chapter 3. The Flight to Sydney. After receiving my visa, the excitement of the upcoming trip started to feel real. I couldn't wait to set foot in Sydney. With all my preparations done, my visa secured, flights booked, and accommodation confirmed, the only thing left to do was to pack my bags and board the plane. The day of my flight finally arrived. I woke up early, double-checked everything to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, and headed to the airport with my luggage. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from the thrill of starting an adventure that I had been dreaming about for so long. At the airport, as I entered Hazrat Shah Jalal International Airport in Dhaka, I was greeted by the familiar sounds of announcements echoing through the halls and the sight of travelers rushing through security checks. This wasn't my first time flying, but it was my first time traveling such a long distance alone. The 10-hour flight felt like a challenge, but I was more than ready. I made my way to the check-in counter, handed over my passport, and received my boarding pass. After clearing security and immigration, I found myself with some time to kill before boarding. I sat down in the waiting area, watching people around me. Families saying goodbye, couples holding hands, solo travelers like myself, all with their own stories and destinations. It made me reflect on how travel connects us all, no matter where we're from. I took out my phone and sent a quick message to my family and friends, letting them know that everything was going smoothly. The excitement was building with every minute that passed. Boarding the plane, when the announcement came to board the flight, my stomach flipped with nervous energy. I had a window seat, which I was glad for. I loved watching the world from above, especially during takeoff and landing. As I settled into my seat, I looked around at my fellow passengers. Some were already dozing off, while others were busy arranging their things. I noticed a family sitting nearby, with 2 children eagerly talking about the animals they hoped to see in Australia. Their enthusiasm made me smile. The flight attendants welcomed us on board, and soon the engines roared to life. I glanced out the window as the plane started to roll down the runway. Before I knew it, we were airborne, leaving Dhaka behind. The view from the window was breathtaking as the city faded into the distance and we soared above the clouds. The journey had officially begun. The long flight. 10 hours in the air is a long time, but I came prepared. I had loaded my tablet with movies, music, and books to keep me entertained during the flight. However, as the plane cruised over Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, I found myself lost in thought more than anything else. I couldn't stop thinking about what awaited me in Sydney, the people I would meet, the places I would see, and the experiences I would have. About halfway through the flight, dinner was served. The food wasn't anything fancy, just a standard airline meal of chicken and rice, but it was enough to fill me up. I chatted briefly with the passenger next to me, a fellow traveler heading to Sydney for a conference. We exchanged stories about our respective journeys, and it was nice to share the excitement with someone who understood the thrill of going to a new place. I tried to sleep after dinner, but the anticipation made it hard to settle down. My mind kept racing, imagining all the sights and sounds I would soon experience in Australia. Landing in Sydney. After what felt like an eternity, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing that we were beginning our descent into Sydney. My heart started pounding again, but this time it wasn't from nervousness. It was pure excitement. I looked out of the window, and there it was. The Australian coastline, glistening under the morning sun. The sight was incredible, and it hit me. I had made it. The plane touched down smoothly, and I felt a rush of relief and excitement. I had finally arrived in Sydney. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began to gather their things, and I joined them, eager to step foot on Australian soil. As I walked off the plane and through the airport, I could feel the difference in the air. It was fresh, crisp, and slightly cool, a welcome change from the heat of Dhaka. I made my way through customs, which thankfully went quickly, and collected my luggage. The reality of being in a completely new country was finally sinking in. First impressions. Sydney's Kingsford Smith Airport was modern and bustling with energy. As I stepped outside, I took a deep breath, soaking in my first real taste of Australia. The sky was clear, and the weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold, just the right temperature for exploring a new city. I caught a taxi to my accommodation, a small but cozy apartment I had rented for the month. As we drove through the streets of Sydney, I couldn't help but marvel at the city's blend of modern architecture and natural beauty. The towering buildings, the iconic Sydney Harbour Bridge in the distance, and the greenery scattered throughout the city all left me in awe. By the time I arrived at the apartment, I was tired but too excited to rest. I unpacked my things, eager to get settled in, and took a moment to reflect on everything. Here I was, in one of the most famous cities in the world, about to embark on an incredible adventure. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 4: First Impressions and Exploring Sydney. After unpacking my things and resting for a short while, I couldn't contain my excitement anymore. It was time to explore Sydney. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and the city outside my window was calling to me. I threw on a light jacket, grabbed my camera, and set out to discover the place that would be my home for the next month. Walking through the streets. As I stepped out of my apartment, I was greeted by the lively sounds of Sydney. There were people walking briskly along the sidewalks, cafes buzzing with activity, and the hum of cars passing by. Sydney felt like a city full of life, but there was a calmness to it as well. Perhaps it was the fresh ocean breeze that balanced the energy of the city. My first walk through the streets was more like a journey of discovery. The architecture was a fascinating mix of old and new. I passed by historic buildings that told stories of Sydney's colonial past, standing side by side with sleek, modern skyscrapers that symbolized the city's rapid development. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of Sydney's multicultural identity, different languages being spoken, diverse restaurants offering food from all over the world, and people from various cultural backgrounds, all going about their day. One of the first things I noticed was how friendly people were. Unlike in some other big cities, where people often rush past each other, the locals in Sydney seemed relaxed and open. I remember stopping to ask for directions to a nearby park, and the man I spoke to not only gave me detailed directions, but also recommended a few places to visit along the way. That small interaction made me feel welcome and at ease. The Sydney Opera House. Of course, no trip to Sydney would be complete without a visit to the Sydney Opera House. It was one of the main reasons I had always dreamed of visiting this city, and seeing it in person was something I had to experience as soon as possible. So I made my way towards Circular Quay, the iconic harbour area where the Opera House proudly stands. As I approached the harbour, I could see the Opera House from a distance, its white sail-like roofs glistening under the afternoon sun. The closer I got, the more awe-inspiring it became. Standing in front of it, I felt a sense of amazement. I had seen countless photos and videos of this world-famous landmark, but none of them did justice to the real thing. It was more than just a building. It was a symbol of Sydney, a masterpiece of modern architecture, and a place where art and culture came to life. I spent some time just walking around the Opera House, taking in the views of the harbour, with the Sydney Harbour Bridge in the background. It was a perfect day, with the sky clear and blue, and the water shimmering in the sunlight. I couldn't help but take countless photos, trying to capture the beauty of the moment. Circular Quay and the Rocks. After soaking in the grandeur of the Opera House, I explored the nearby area of Circular Quay. This part of the city was full of energy, with ferries coming and going, street performers entertaining the crowds, and tourists and locals alike enjoying the vibrant atmosphere. I stopped at a small cafe by the water and enjoyed a cup of coffee while watching the boats sail by. It was a moment of pure peace, and I couldn't believe how lucky I was to be experiencing it. From Circular Quay, I wandered into the Rocks, one of Sydney's oldest neighbourhoods. The Rocks is known for its rich history, with cobblestone streets and colonial-era buildings that take you back in time. It was a stark contrast to the modern skyline just a few blocks away, but that's what I loved about Sydney. It was a city where the past and the present coexisted in perfect harmony. I spent hours exploring the Rocks, visiting small museums that told the story of Sydney's early settlers, and browsing through the local markets where artisans sold handmade crafts and souvenirs. It was in this part of the city that I began to truly appreciate Sydney's history and the unique blend of cultures that shaped it. New friends. One of the highlights of my first day exploring Sydney was meeting new people. While I was strolling through the rocks, I struck up a conversation with a fellow traveler, a young man from Japan named Kenji. He was also visiting Sydney for the first time, and we instantly connected over our shared excitement about discovering the city. We ended up spending the rest of the afternoon together, exploring the streets and sharing stories about our respective cultures. Kenji was planning to stay in Australia for a few months, working part-time while traveling around the country. He had already been to Melbourne and Brisbane, and he gave me some great tips on places to visit while I was in Sydney. It was refreshing to make a new friend so quickly, and it reminded me of one of the best parts of travel: the connections you make with people from all over the world. The food. As the day went on, I started to feel hungry, so Kenji and I decided to find a place to eat. Sydney is known for its diverse food scene, and I was eager to try something new. We found a small restaurant near the harbour that served fresh seafood, and I decided to order fish and chips, a classic Australian dish. The fish was perfectly cooked, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, and the view of the harbour made the meal even better. Food in Sydney was a revelation for me. In the days that followed, I would try everything from Thai curries to Italian pasta, and even some Australian specialties like kangaroo steak, which, to my surprise, was quite delicious. The city's multiculturalism was reflected in its food, and every meal felt like an adventure. First impressions. As the sun began to set and the city lights started to twinkle, I made my way back to the apartment. My first day in Sydney had been everything I hoped for and more. The beauty of the city, the warmth of the people, the incredible food, and the sense of history and modernity all rolled into one. It was overwhelming in the best way possible. That night, as I lay in bed, tired but happy, I thought about all the adventures that lay ahead. There was still so much to see and do, but one thing was clear: Sydney had already captured my heart. Chapter 5. Challenges and New Discoveries. Although my first impressions of Sydney were filled with excitement and wonder, my journey wasn't without its challenges. Every adventure comes with its own set of obstacles, and living in a new city, even for a short time, was no exception. From the practical difficulties of navigating a foreign place to the unexpected emotional ups and downs, I learned a lot about myself during my month-long stay in Sydney. Dealing with jet lag. The first challenge hit me hard on my second day. Jet lag. Although I had been too excited to feel it when I first arrived, the time difference between Bangladesh and Australia finally caught up with me. I woke up feeling groggy, disoriented, and completely exhausted. My body was still on Bangladesh time, and it didn't help that I hadn't slept much on the plane. It was frustrating because I had so many plans and places I wanted to visit, but I barely had the energy to leave the apartment. I spent most of that day trying to adjust to the new time zone, taking naps and drinking coffee in hopes of shaking off the fatigue. It was a reminder that even though travel can be exhilarating, it's important to give yourself time to rest and recover. By the next day, I started feeling better, and I made a mental note to take things slower. Sydney wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't have to see everything all at once. Navigating the city. Another challenge I faced was navigating the city's public transportation system. Coming from Dhaka, where the traffic and transport system can be chaotic, I was pleasantly surprised by how well organized Sydney's buses, trains, and ferries were. However, that didn't mean it was easy to figure out at first. I remember the first time I tried to take the train to Bondi Beach, one of the city's most famous destinations. I stood in front of the ticket machine, staring at the screen, completely lost. There were so many options, different zones, times, and fare types, and I wasn't sure which one to choose. After a few failed attempts, I asked a local for help, and they kindly walked me through the process. Once I got the hang of it, using public transportation became one of my favorite things about living in Sydney. The trains were clean and punctual, the buses ran regularly, and the ferries offered stunning views of the harbour. Every ride felt like a little adventure, and I soon became comfortable getting around the city on my own. One of the more unexpected challenges was dealing with loneliness. While I had met Kenji on my first day, making deeper connections with people in a new city takes time. I spent the first week exploring on my own, which was fun but also made me realize how much I missed my family and friends back in Bangladesh. I'm a naturally social person, and being in a foreign place without a support network felt isolating at times. There were moments when I felt a pang of homesickness, especially during quiet evenings when the excitement of sightseeing wore off, and I found myself missing familiar faces and conversations. But things started to change when I pushed myself out of my comfort zone. I signed up for a language exchange event at a local cafe, hoping to meet new people and practice my English teaching skills. It turned out to be a fantastic decision. The event was filled with locals and international travelers who were eager to connect and learn from each other. I met people from all over the world, from Brazil, France, South Korea, and of course Australia. We exchanged stories about our travels, our cultures, and our experiences living in Sydney. What I loved most was the sense of community that formed so quickly. Despite our different backgrounds, we all had something in common, the desire to explore and learn. By the end of the night, I had made several new friends, and the city suddenly felt a lot less lonely. Cultural differences. One of the most fascinating aspects of my stay in Sydney was observing the cultural differences between Australia and Bangladesh. While some things were familiar, many were new and took a bit of getting used to. For example, Australians are incredibly laid back, even in professional settings. Coming from a culture where formality and respect are highly valued, I was surprised by how casual interactions could be. People addressed each other by their first names even in business situations, and there was a strong emphasis on work-life balance. It was refreshing to see how Australians valued their free time and made an effort to enjoy life outside of work. Another thing that stood out to me was the diversity in Sydney. The city is a melting pot of cultures, with people from all over the world living and working together. Walking down the street, I would hear different languages being spoken and see a variety of cultural expressions, from food to fashion to festivals. It made me appreciate how multiculturalism was embraced and celebrated in Australia, and it reminded me of how important it is to stay open-minded and curious about other cultures. Overcoming language barriers. As an English teacher, I was fairly confident in my language skills, but I quickly realized that understanding the Australian accent could be a challenge. Australians have a unique way of speaking. They often shorten words and use slang that's specific to their country. For example, afternoon becomes arvo, and barbecue is shortened to Barbie. It was fascinating to hear these expressions, but it also took some time to adjust to the local way of speaking. I remember one time at a cafe, I ordered a coffee, and the barista asked if I wanted a flat white. I had no idea what that was at the time, so I just nodded and said yes. It turned out to be one of my favorite discoveries in Australia. A flat white is a type of coffee that's similar to a latte, but with less foam. After that, it became my go-to drink. Over time, I learned to appreciate the quirks of Australian English, and it became one of the things I enjoyed most about living in Sydney. It was a reminder that even though English is spoken in many countries, it's always shaped by the local culture and context. In the last chapter, there is a list of Australian shortened words and slang, along with how to use them. So stay tuned until the end of this video. Dealing with homesickness. Homesickness was something I hadn't expected to feel as strongly as I did. Despite all the wonderful experiences I was having in Sydney, there were moments when I missed home terribly. I missed the warmth of my family, the familiarity of my surroundings, and even the simple things like Bangladeshi food. One day, I decided to visit a Bangladeshi restaurant I had found online. Walking into the restaurant felt like stepping into a little piece of home. The aromas of familiar spices filled the air, and the sight of traditional dishes like biryani and samosas brought a sense of comfort. I ordered a plate of biryani, and for a brief moment, I felt like I was back in Dhaka. Eating that meal reminded me that while it's important to embrace new experiences, it's also okay to hold on to the things that connect you to home. After that, whenever I felt a bit homesick, I would return to that restaurant for a taste of Bangladesh, and it always lifted my spirits. Personal growth. Looking back, the challenges I faced during my time in Sydney helped me grow in ways I hadn't anticipated. I learned to be more independent, to adapt to new environments, and to embrace the unknown. Every difficulty, whether it was dealing with jet lag, navigating the city, or overcoming homesickness, taught me something valuable about myself and the world around me. By the end of my stay, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had not only explored a new city, but had also overcome the challenges that came with living in a foreign place. The experience made me more confident in my abilities and more open to future adventures. Chapter 6. Exploring Sydney's Natural Wonders. After overcoming the initial challenges of jet lag, homesickness, and adjusting to life in Sydney, I was finally ready to dive into the breathtaking natural beauty the city has to offer. My month-long stay was not just about experiencing urban life, but also about embracing the stunning landscapes that surround Sydney. From iconic beaches to lush national parks, each adventure filled me with awe and wonder. Bondi Beach. One of the first places I visited was Bondi Beach, a world-famous stretch of golden sand and surf. I had heard so much about it, and the first sight of the turquoise waves crashing against the shore took my breath away. It was a sunny day, perfect for spending time at the beach. I joined the throngs of sunbathers and surfers, feeling a surge of excitement. As I settled onto my beach towel, I couldn't help but watch the surfers riding the waves. It was mesmerizing to see them glide effortlessly over the water, their silhouettes framed against the blue sky. I decided to give it a try and signed up for a surfing lesson. I had always been fascinated by surfing, but I had never attempted it before. The lesson was both thrilling and challenging. I spent more time falling into the water than actually standing on the board, but each attempt brought me closer to success. With each wave, I learned to read the ocean and embrace the thrill of the sport. By the end of the day, I had finally stood up on the board, even if just for a few seconds. The experience was exhilarating, and I left Bondi Beach feeling accomplished and grateful for the opportunity. Exploring the Royal Botanic Garden. My next adventure took me to the Royal Botanic Garden, a serene oasis located near the Sydney Opera House. As soon as I entered, I was enveloped by the fragrance of blooming flowers and the sounds of chirping birds. The garden was a perfect place to relax and recharge. I spent hours wandering through the various themed gardens, from the tropical rainforest to the herb garden. Each section offered something unique, and I enjoyed learning about the different plant species native to Australia. I found a peaceful spot under a massive fig tree where I sat for a while, soaking in the beauty of my surroundings. It was moments like these that reminded me to slow down and appreciate the little things in life. The highlight of my visit was reaching Mrs. Macquarie's chair, a stunning lookout point that provided panoramic views of Sydney Harbour. The sight of the Sydney Opera House and the Harbour Bridge against the backdrop of the blue water was breathtaking. I took a moment to capture the beauty on my camera, knowing it would be a cherished memory of my time in Australia. Discovering the Blue Mountains. One of the most memorable experiences of my trip was visiting the Blue Mountains, the UNESCO World Heritage Site just a short train ride from Sydney. The mountains are known for their stunning landscapes, eucalyptus forests, and dramatic cliffs. Early one morning, I boarded a train to Katoomba, the gateway to the Blue Mountains. The journey was scenic, with lush greenery lining the tracks. Once I arrived, I made my way to the Echo Point Lookout, where I was greeted by the majestic view of the Three Sisters Rock Formation. The sight was truly awe-inspiring, and I felt small in comparison to the towering cliffs around me. I decided to hike one of the trails that led down into the valley. The steep descent was challenging, but I was rewarded with breathtaking views at every turn. The air was crisp, and the sounds of nature filled my ears. The rustling leaves, distant bird calls, and the rush of waterfalls. I felt a sense of peace and tranquility as I connected with the beauty of the natural world. During my hike, I encountered several friendly hikers, and we exchanged stories about our travels. One couple from Germany invited me to join them for a picnic near a waterfall. We shared sandwiches and talked about our adventures, and it was moments like this that made me realize the power of travel. It brings people together, transcending language and cultural barriers. Experiencing the wildlife. Australia is renowned for its unique wildlife, and I was determined to see some of it up close. I decided to visit Taronga Zoo, which is located on the shores of Sydney Harbour. The zoo is home to a diverse array of animals, including kangaroos, koalas, and native Australian birds. Walking through the zoo, I was in awe of the different species I encountered. Seeing a koala munching on eucalyptus leaves was a highlight, and I couldn't resist taking a selfie with one. I also enjoyed watching the kangaroos hopping around their enclosure, and I learned about the conservation efforts being made to protect these incredible creatures. The best part of my visit was the roar and snore experience, where I spent the night at the zoo. It was an unforgettable adventure. Falling asleep to the sounds of wildlife and waking up to the sight of animals stirring in the morning light. The experience deepened my appreciation for Australia's unique fauna and the importance of conservation. Challenges of nature. While my experiences in nature were mostly positive, they weren't without challenges. During my hike in the Blue Mountains, I encountered a sudden rainstorm that took me by surprise. The sky turned dark, and heavy rain poured down, soaking me within minutes. I panicked for a moment, unsure of what to do. But then I remembered my travel mantra: embrace the unexpected. Instead of letting the rain ruin my adventure, I sought shelter under a large tree and decided to wait it out. It was a reminder that nature is unpredictable, and sometimes you just have to go with the flow. After the rain subsided, the world around me seemed to sparkle, and I was rewarded with a breathtaking rainbow stretching across the sky. Concluding reflections. My explorations of Sydney's natural wonders not only provided me with stunning visuals and unforgettable experiences, but also taught me valuable lessons about resilience, adaptability, and the importance of connecting with nature. Every hike, beach visit, and wildlife encounter added to the richness of my journey. As I prepared to share my experiences with my students, I knew that these lessons would resonate with them. I wanted them to understand that travel is about more than just seeing new places. It's about embracing challenges, connecting with people, and appreciating the beauty of the world around us. In the next chapter, I'll share some of the delicious foods I tried during my stay in Sydney, highlighting the diverse culinary experiences that make this city truly unique. Chapter 7: The Culinary Adventures of Sydney. One of the most exciting aspects of traveling is undoubtedly the opportunity to explore new cuisines. Sydney, with its vibrant food scene, offered me a delightful culinary adventure that I was eager to dive into. From casual eateries to fine dining, the diverse flavors and cultural influences I experienced during my month in Sydney truly amazed me. The coffee culture. Upon my arrival, I quickly learned that coffee culture in Sydney is taken very seriously. The city boasts an impressive number of cafes, each with its own unique style and offerings. I was determined to start each day with a great cup of coffee, so I set out to explore some of the best cafes in the city. My favorite spot became a small cafe called Brewtown Newtown, known for its artisanal coffee and delicious pastries. The baristas there were not just coffee makers, they were artists. I watched in awe as they skillfully prepared lattes, creating beautiful foam art on top. I decided to try a flat white, a local favorite made with velvety microfoam. The first sip was heavenly, rich, smooth, and just the right amount of caffeine to kickstart my day. Every day, I discovered new cafes, each with its own ambiance and unique blend of coffee. I enjoyed chatting with locals who shared their favorite spots and recommendations, deepening my appreciation for Sydney's vibrant coffee culture. Savoring Australian cuisine. As I ventured beyond coffee, I made it a point to try traditional Australian dishes. One of my first stops was Harry's Cafe de Wheels, a famous food truck that serves a classic Australian meat pie. I ordered the tiger pie, topped with mashed potatoes, mushy peas, and gravy. The first bite was a revelation. The flaky crust, combined with the savory filling, was a comforting reminder of home-cooked meals. I also indulged in lamingtons, a beloved Australian dessert. These sponge cakes, coated in chocolate and rolled in coconut, were not only delicious, but also reminded me of the sweet treats my grandmother used to make. I enjoyed them with a cup of tea while relaxing in one of Sydney's many parks, feeling grateful for the simple pleasures of life. Exploring international flavors. Sydney is a melting pot of cultures, and its food scene reflects this diversity. I took the opportunity to explore various international cuisines available throughout the city. One evening, I joined a food tour in Chinatown, where I tasted a variety of dishes from different Asian cultures. I sampled dumplings from a bustling stall, each filled with flavorful ingredients. The highlight was a traditional Peking duck pancake, which was crispy and succulent. I also discovered banh mi, a Vietnamese sandwich filled with marinated meats and fresh herbs, bursting with flavor in every bite. In my quest for global flavors, I also visited Mediterranean and Middle Eastern restaurants, where I tried hummus, falafel, and baklava. Each meal was an adventure, and I found joy in sharing these dishes with new friends I met along the way. Seafood delights. Given Sydney's coastal location, fresh seafood was a must-try on my culinary journey. I visited the Sydney Fish Market, one of the largest seafood markets in the world. Walking through the market, I was captivated by the variety of fresh catches on display, from giant prawns to succulent oysters. I joined a seafood cooking class where I learned how to prepare a classic Australian dish called fish and chips. Under the guidance of a skilled chef, I learned the art of selecting the freshest fish, seasoning it perfectly, and achieving the perfect golden brown batter. The satisfaction of tasting my own creation was immense, and I felt a sense of accomplishment as I enjoyed it with a side of homemade tartar sauce. Navigating dietary preferences. While indulging in all these culinary delights, I also became aware of the dietary preferences and restrictions that many locals follow. Sydney has a thriving vegetarian and vegan scene, with numerous restaurants catering to plant-based diets. I wanted to experience this aspect of Sydney's food culture, so I ventured into a well-known vegan cafe called Yuli's. There, I tried a delightful vegan burger made with chickpeas, avocado, and a tangy sauce. It was not only healthy but also bursting with flavor. I was surprised to discover that the food was so delicious that I didn't even miss meat. This experience taught me the importance of inclusivity in dining, where everyone can find something to enjoy, regardless of their dietary choices. Challenges with food. Despite the culinary joys, I also faced some challenges. One day, I decided to try my hand at cooking a traditional Bangladeshi dish for some friends I had made during my stay. I gathered all the ingredients and excitedly prepared biryani. However, I quickly realized that some of the spices I needed were difficult to find in Sydney. I had to get creative and adapt the recipe with what was available, which was a valuable lesson in flexibility. When it came time to serve the dish, I felt nervous but hopeful. To my delight, my friends loved it, and they appreciated the effort I had put into making a meal from my culture. This experience deepened our friendship and provided me with a sense of connection to my roots while being far from home. Concluding thoughts on culinary experiences. As I reflected on my culinary adventures, I realized that food is not just about sustenance. It's a way to connect with others and explore cultures. Each meal I enjoyed in Sydney was an opportunity to meet new people, share stories, and create lasting memories. Food has the power to bring people together. And through my experiences, I discovered a newfound appreciation for the culinary arts and the diversity that exists within them. In the next chapter, I will share the unforgettable friendships I made during my stay, highlighting the connections that transcended borders and cultures. Chapter 8: The Friends I Made Along the Way. One of the most rewarding aspects of my month-long journey in Sydney was the opportunity to meet and connect with people from all walks of life. As an English teacher, I had always emphasized the importance of relationships and cultural exchanges, and my experience in Australia proved just how impactful these connections can be. Meeting new faces. From the moment I stepped off the plane, I was eager to make friends. I started my adventure by joining a local community group that organized events for international travelers. This group became my lifeline in a foreign land, offering not just friendship, but also a sense of belonging. At one of the group's meetups, I met Alice, an Australian native with a passion for travel. She welcomed me with open arms and shared her favorite places to explore in Sydney. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and we quickly bonded over our shared love for discovering new cultures. Alice introduced me to her circle of friends, and soon I was part of a vibrant community of locals and international travelers. Exploring Sydney together. Alice and I spent countless hours exploring the city, visiting iconic landmarks like the Sydney Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. One sunny afternoon, we decided to take a ferry to Manly Beach, a popular spot for both locals and tourists. As we sailed across the sparkling waters of Sydney Harbour, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. The view of the city skyline from the ferry was breathtaking, and it was moments like these that made me appreciate the beauty of my surroundings. Once we arrived at Manly Beach, we enjoyed a leisurely walk along the shore, savoring the sound of the waves crashing against the sand. Alice shared stories about her upbringing in Sydney, revealing the city's hidden gems that only a local would know. We ended the day with fish and chips from a beachside shack, laughing and sharing our life stories while watching the sunset over the ocean. Making international friends. In addition to connecting with locals, I also met fellow travelers from various countries. One evening, I attended a language exchange event at a local pub where I had the chance to meet people from Japan, Brazil, and France. We spent hours sharing our cultures, languages, and culinary traditions. I became particularly close with Liam, a friendly backpacker from Ireland. We hit it off instantly, bonding over our shared experiences as teachers. Liam had been traveling for months, exploring different countries and immersing himself in local cultures. He shared tales of his adventures, and I was inspired by his courage to take the leap into the unknown. As our friendship blossomed, Liam and I decided to embark on a weekend road trip to the Blue Mountains, a stunning national park just outside of Sydney. We rented a car and set off early in the morning, excited for the adventure that awaited us. Adventuring in the Blue Mountains. The Blue Mountains were a sight to behold, with majestic cliffs, lush forests, and breathtaking waterfalls. We spent the day hiking through various trails, marveling at the beauty of nature around us. At Echo Point, we stood in awe of the famous Three Sisters rock formation, a truly iconic view. During our hike, we encountered challenges like steep trails and slippery paths. However, these obstacles only brought us closer together. We encouraged each other and shared laughs, reminding ourselves that it was all part of the adventure. Our camaraderie grew as we faced these challenges, and by the end of the day, we felt like lifelong friends. Celebrating cultural differences. Throughout my time in Sydney, I learned that friendship knows no borders. Each person I met brought their own unique stories and perspectives to our conversations. I cherished the moments when we shared meals together, introducing each other to our traditional dishes. One evening, I hosted a small dinner at my apartment, inviting Alice, Liam, and a few others to enjoy a mix of Bangladeshi and Australian cuisine. I prepared biryani, while Alice brought her famous pavlova, a delicious meringue dessert. The table was filled with laughter and lively discussions about our cultures, highlighting the beauty of diversity. As the night unfolded, we shared stories about our families, traditions, and the social issues we faced in our respective countries. I was fascinated to hear Liam's perspective on education in Ireland and Alice's insights on Australia's multicultural society. These conversations not only deepened our friendships, but also broadened my understanding of the world. Facing challenges together. As the days went by, I also faced some personal challenges during my stay. I experienced homesickness and moments of self-doubt. Fortunately, my newfound friends were there to support me. When I shared my feelings, they encouraged me to embrace my experiences and reminded me of the incredible journey I was on. Alice introduced me to mindfulness practices, suggesting we take quiet moments in nature to reflect and rejuvenate. Together, we would spend time in Royal Botanic Garden, surrounded by the soothing sounds of nature, allowing ourselves to unwind and find peace. Saying goodbye. As my time in Sydney came to an end, I found it hard to say goodbye to the friends I had made. We organized a farewell gathering, where we shared our favorite memories and expressed our gratitude for the experiences we had together. I felt a mix of emotions. Sadness at leaving behind the friendships I had forged and excitement for the future. We promised to stay connected, knowing that technology would help bridge the distance between us. I left Sydney with a heart full of memories and the warmth of friendship that transcended borders. In the next chapter, I will reflect on the challenges I faced during my trip and how I overcame them, transforming obstacles into opportunities for growth and learning. Chapter 9: Overcoming Challenges. Traveling, while exhilarating, often comes with its own set of challenges. During my month in Sydney, I faced several obstacles that tested my resilience and adaptability. Each challenge, however, became an opportunity for growth and self-discovery, shaping my journey in unexpected ways. Navigating the city. One of the first challenges I encountered was navigating Sydney's extensive public transportation system. Coming from Bangladesh, where I was used to a different mode of transport, I found myself overwhelmed by the bus and train schedules. On my first day, I misread the map and ended up on a bus heading in the opposite direction. Instead of letting frustration take over, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that getting lost was part of the adventure. I decided to embrace the moment and explore the new areas I found myself in. I stumbled upon a charming little neighborhood cafe where I met some friendly locals who offered directions and suggestions for places to visit. From that point on, I approached public transport with curiosity rather than anxiety. I downloaded apps that helped me navigate the system more efficiently and began to enjoy the journey itself. Each trip became a chance to observe the city and its people, enriching my experience in ways I hadn't anticipated. Coping with homesickness. As the weeks passed, I began to feel the pangs of homesickness. Being away from my family and the familiar comforts of home was difficult, especially during moments when I longed for my mother's cooking or the warmth of my family's laughter. I struggled with feelings of isolation, especially during quiet evenings when I reflected on my experiences. To cope with these feelings, I turned to my new friends. Sharing my feelings with Alice and Liam proved to be therapeutic. They encouraged me to talk about my family and share stories from back home. I started to feel more connected to them as they shared their own experiences of homesickness from their travels. Additionally, I made it a point to reach out to my family regularly. Video calls became a source of comfort, allowing me to share my experiences with them and feel their support. By maintaining these connections, I learned to balance my longing for home with the excitement of my new experiences in Sydney. Facing cultural differences. As an English teacher, I was excited to experience Australia's diverse culture. However, I quickly realized that cultural differences could also lead to misunderstandings. One evening at a pub, I made a light-hearted joke that I thought was funny, but it seemed to fall flat with my new Australian friends. I noticed a moment of awkward silence before someone politely changed the subject. This experience made me acutely aware of how humor can vary from culture to culture. I took it as a learning moment, recognizing that what might be acceptable in one culture could be perceived differently in another. I started paying closer attention to local customs and social cues, which helped me better understand the dynamics of my new friendships. Adapting to different expectations. Throughout my stay, I also encountered various expectations regarding social interactions and etiquette. In Bangladesh, we often greet friends and family with hugs and close physical contact, but I noticed that Australians tended to be more reserved when it came to personal space. During my first few days, I instinctively leaned in for hugs when greeting my new friends, only to find them stepping back slightly. This subtle adjustment in expectations taught me the importance of being mindful of cultural norms. I learned to observe and adapt my behavior to foster a comfortable environment for everyone. To make up for this, I began initiating conversations about cultural differences with my friends, which not only broke the ice, but also enriched our interactions. This openness fostered deeper connections and allowed us to learn from each other's experiences. Confronting financial challenges. Traveling in a foreign city also posed financial challenges. I had budgeted for my trip, but unexpected expenses arose, such as last-minute excursions and meals at restaurants. I felt a growing concern about overspending and began to stress about my finances. To tackle this issue, I took a step back and reassessed my budget. I learned to be more mindful of my spending habits by prioritizing experiences that mattered most to me. I also explored local markets and prepared some of my own meals to save costs, which allowed me to savor both culinary adventures and a sense of accomplishment. I discovered that many locals and travelers were willing to share their tips on saving money, whether it was by taking advantage of free events or utilizing public parks for picnics. By embracing this resourcefulness, I could still enjoy my time in Sydney without feeling financially burdened. The power of resilience. Looking back, I realized that every challenge I faced contributed to my growth as an individual. The moments of discomfort taught me resilience, adaptability, and the importance of a positive mindset. I learned to approach obstacles with curiosity and an open heart, turning potential setbacks into opportunities for personal development. As my month in Sydney drew to a close, I reflected on the myriad of experiences that had shaped my journey. I understood that challenges are an inherent part of travel, but how we respond to them defines our adventures. In the next chapter, I will share the powerful emotions I experienced during my time in Sydney and how these feelings shaped my journey, leaving a lasting impact on my life as both a traveler and a teacher. Chapter 10: Emotions and Reflections. As my month-long journey in Sydney came to an end, I found myself enveloped in a whirlwind of emotions. Each day had been a blend of excitement, joy, challenges, and growth. And I was left with a profound sense of gratitude for the experiences I had gathered. A journey of discovery. Upon arriving in Sydney, I was filled with anticipation. The thrill of exploring a new city, meeting new people, and immersing myself in a different culture was exhilarating. Every moment was a discovery, from the vibrant streets of Newtown to the stunning vistas of Bondi Beach. The excitement of adventure made my heart race, and I often found myself smiling at the beauty surrounding me. As I settled into my daily routine, I experienced a range of emotions, from elation to homesickness. The initial thrill of being in a new city gradually evolved into a deeper connection with the people and places around me. I began to appreciate the nuances of Australian life, from the laid-back attitude to the friendly greetings exchanged between strangers. This feeling of belonging made my heart swell with happiness. Overcoming challenges. However, along with the excitement came moments of uncertainty. As I faced challenges, getting lost, grappling with homesickness, and navigating cultural differences, I often felt overwhelmed. These moments brought about feelings of doubt and frustration. There were days when I questioned my ability to adapt and thrive in a new environment. Yet, each challenge was accompanied by valuable lessons. I learned to rely on my inner strength and resilience. With the support of my new friends, I embraced the discomfort and transformed it into an opportunity for growth. I discovered that feeling vulnerable was not a weakness, but a testament to my journey. Every obstacle I overcame filled me with a sense of accomplishment and pride. The joy of connection. One of the most profound emotions I experienced during my trip was the joy of connection. Meeting people from diverse backgrounds opened my eyes to the richness of human experiences. Whether it was sharing a meal with friends or exchanging stories with fellow travelers, these moments of connection created lasting bonds. I remember a particular evening spent at Bondi Beach where I joined a group of locals for a beach barbecue. The atmosphere was vibrant, filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of delicious food. As we gathered around the fire, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The shared stories and laughter transcended cultural barriers, reminding me of the universal language of friendship. Moments of reflection. As I stood at Sydney Harbour, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. It was in these quiet moments of reflection that I truly understood the impact of my journey. I realized how much I had grown as a person and how my experiences in Sydney would shape my life moving forward. During those reflective moments, I thought about my students back in Bangladesh. I wanted to share the beauty of this experience with them, to inspire them to pursue their dreams fearlessly. My time in Sydney was not just about sightseeing. It was about understanding the importance of cultural exchange, friendship, and resilience. I felt a renewed sense of purpose in my role as an English teacher, eager to instill the values of exploration and connection in my students. The weight of goodbye. As my departure day approached, I felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. I was excited to return home and share my experiences, but I was also saddened to leave behind the friends I had made and the city I had come to love. The thought of saying goodbye weighed heavily on my heart. On my last night in Sydney, I organized a farewell dinner with Alice, Liam, and the friends I had made during my trip. We gathered at a cozy restaurant, reminiscing about our adventures and sharing our hopes for the future. Tears flowed as we exchanged heartfelt goodbyes, promising to stay in touch despite the distance. I realized that true friendships could withstand the test of time and geography. Looking ahead. As I boarded the plane, I reflected on the incredible journey I had undertaken. The memories I created in Sydney would forever hold a special place in my heart. I had faced challenges, forged meaningful connections, and embraced the beauty of a different culture. With my mind buzzing with stories to share and lessons learned, I looked forward to returning to my students in Bangladesh. I knew I would bring back more than just souvenirs. I would carry the spirit of adventure and the importance of embracing diversity in every lesson I taught. My experiences in Sydney had not only transformed me as a traveler, but also as an educator. In the next chapter, I will compile a list of Australian slang and colloquial expressions I learned during my trip. These phrases will serve as a fun and engaging way to share my experiences with my students, bridging the gap between cultures through language. Chapter 11: Australian Slang and Expressions. As my adventure in Sydney came to an end, I found myself fascinated by the unique language of Australia. The slang and colloquial expressions added color and flavor to my interactions with locals. I knew that sharing these expressions with my students would not only make my stories more engaging, but also give them a taste of Australian culture. Here are some of the most memorable Australian slang terms and expressions I encountered during my trip. Common Australian shortenings. 1. Arvo, meaning afternoon. Usage: let's meet this arvo. 2. Avo, meaning avocado. Usage: I love putting avo on my toast. 3. Barbie, meaning barbecue. Usage: we're having a Barbie at my place this weekend. 4. Bicky, meaning biscuit, cookie. Usage: do you want a bicky with your tea? 5. Bistro, meaning informal restaurant. Usage: let's grab dinner at the local bistro. 6. Brolly, meaning umbrella. Usage: don't forget your brolly, it might rain. 7. Cuppa, meaning cup of tea or coffee. Usage: I'll put the kettle on for a cuppa. 8. Doco, meaning documentary. Usage: did you see that doco about the Great Barrier Reef? 9. Footy, meaning football, usually Australian rules football or rugby. Usage: are you going to the footy this weekend? 10. Mozzie, meaning mosquito. Usage: I got bitten by a mozzie last night. 11. Sanga, meaning sandwich. Usage: I'll make a sanga for lunch. 12. Telly, meaning television. Usage: what's on the telly tonight? 13. Tinny, meaning canned beer. Usage: let's crack a tinny after work. 14. Uni, meaning university. Usage: I'm going to uni next year. 15. Vegemite, meaning a spread made from yeast extract. Usage: I love my toast with Vegemite. 16. Yabby, meaning a freshwater crayfish. Usage: we went yabbing on the weekend. Common Australian slang. 1. Aussie, meaning Australian. Usage: he's a proud Aussie. 2. Bogan, meaning an unsophisticated or uncultured person. Usage: he's a bit of a bogan, but he's fun. 3. Chook, meaning chicken. Usage: we're having roast chook for dinner. 4. Fair dinkum, meaning genuine or real. Usage: is that fair dinkum? I can't believe it. 5. Day, meaning hello. Usage: g'day mate. 6. Macca's, meaning McDonald's. Usage: let's grab some food at Macca's. 7. No worries, meaning it's okay or not a problem. Usage: thanks for helping me. No worries. 8. Stoked, meaning very pleased or happy. Usage: I'm stoked about my exam results. 9. Sickie, meaning a day off work taken when not actually sick. Usage: I took a sickie to go to the beach. 10. Servo, meaning service station, gas station. Usage: I need to stop at the servo for fuel. 11. Root, meaning to have sexual intercourse, also means to support a sports team. Usage: they were rooting for their team at the game. 12. Ripper, meaning excellent or fantastic. Usage: that was a ripper of a match. 13. Sus, meaning to investigate or figure out. Usage: I need to suss out the new cafe. 14. Smoko, meaning a break, usually for a cigarette. Usage: let's take a smoko before we continue working. 15. Togs, meaning swimsuit. Usage: don't forget your togs for the beach. 16. Whinge, meaning to complain or whine. Usage: stop whinging and get on with it. Regional variations. Some terms may be more common in certain states or cities. For example, footy in Victoria often refers specifically to Australian rules football, while in New South Wales it may refer to rugby. Slang evolution. Australian slang is dynamic and constantly evolving. New expressions can emerge from cultural trends, media, or technology, while older terms may fade from use. Sharing the experience with my students. Upon returning to Bangladesh, I was excited to share these Australian slang expressions with my students. I organized a fun session where we explored the meanings behind each term and practiced using them in sentences. I encouraged my students to embrace the idea that language is a living, breathing entity that reflects the culture and identity of its speakers. In addition to the slang, I shared stories of my encounters and experiences in Sydney, illustrating how these expressions came to life in everyday conversations. The laughter and engagement in the classroom made me realize how powerful language can be in bridging cultural gaps. Conclusion. My month in Sydney was filled with unforgettable experiences, challenges, and lessons learned. The slang and colloquial expressions I encountered became a lens through which I understood the local culture more deeply. As I continue my journey as an English teacher, I look forward to weaving these experiences into my lessons, inspiring my students to explore the world beyond their classroom walls. In the final chapter, I will reflect on the overall impact of this journey on my life and career as a teacher, and how these experiences shaped my outlook on travel and education. Chapter 12, Final Reflections. As I sit down to reflect on my incredible journey in Sydney, I am overwhelmed by the myriad of experiences that have shaped my time there. This trip was more than just a vacation. It was a transformative journey that has influenced my life and career as an English teacher in profound ways. A journey of growth. Looking back, I can see how every aspect of my trip contributed to my personal growth. From the moment I began preparing for the journey to my return home, I faced challenges that pushed me out of my comfort zone. Whether it was navigating the bustling streets of Sydney, overcoming homesickness, or adapting to a new culture, each experience helped me develop resilience and adaptability. This growth was not only about conquering difficulties, it was also about embracing new perspectives. Meeting people from diverse backgrounds opened my eyes to different ways of thinking and living. I learned to appreciate the richness of human experiences and how culture shapes our identities. These lessons are invaluable as I strive to foster a similar spirit of exploration and understanding in my students. The impact on my teaching. My time in Sydney has significantly impacted my approach to teaching English. I returned with a newfound passion for incorporating real-world experiences into my lessons. I realized that language is not just a subject to be studied. It is a bridge that connects people and cultures. By sharing my stories, the slang I learned, and the emotions I experienced, I hope to inspire my students to see language as a tool for connection. Additionally, I plan to create more interactive and engaging lessons that encourage my students to explore the world beyond the classroom. Whether through virtual exchanges with students in other countries or incorporating cultural elements into my lessons, I want to instill in my students a curiosity about the world and a desire to engage with it. Cherishing connections. The friendships I formed during my time in Sydney are among the most cherished aspects of my journey. The connections I made with locals and fellow travelers enriched my experience and provided me with a sense of belonging. I learned that friendships can transcend geographical boundaries and cultural differences. These relationships remind me of the power of kindness and understanding in fostering community. I have kept in touch with my Australian friends, sharing our experiences and learning from each other. This ongoing connection is a testament to the bonds we created during my visit and highlights the importance of maintaining relationships in our increasingly globalized world. A call to adventure. As I share my story with my students, I hope to ignite a sense of adventure in their hearts. I want them to understand that the world is full of opportunities for exploration and learning. Traveling may not always be feasible, but they can still embark on journeys of discovery through books, documentaries, and interactions with diverse individuals in their communities. I encourage them to step out of their comfort zones, embrace new experiences, and cultivate a spirit of curiosity. Each journey, whether big or small, contributes to our understanding of the world and enriches our lives. Final thoughts. In conclusion, my month in Sydney has left an indelible mark on my life and teaching career. The experiences, challenges, and connections I made during this journey have shaped my understanding of language, culture, and community. As I continue my journey as an English teacher, I am excited to share these lessons with my students and inspire them to embrace their own adventures, wherever they may lead. Thank you for joining me on this journey to Sydney. I hope my story encourages you to explore the world, connect with others, and discover the beauty that lies within each new experience.